Aircraft carriers are expensive. The latest carrier in the US Navy, part of what's called the Ford class, costs $12.8 billion per ship. And that's before the cost of fixing new technology, aircraft flying off the deck, and the cost of operating the carrier in the high seas for months at a time. The US has more active aircraft carriers than every other country in the world combined. The US Navy currently has 10 Nimitz-class carriers, 1 Ford-class carrier, and 9 amphibious assault ships, which are smaller and that focus on helicopters and short takeoff and vertical landing aircraft. A Nimitz-class carrier can carry a mix of FNA-18E/F Super Hornets, E-2D Hawkeye surveillance aircraft, and an assortment of other support aircraft and helicopters. The carrier fighter of the future is the F-35C, but to field the new aircraft, most US carriers will need to be upgraded.
If you want to operate aircraft carriers, you need a whole lot of high-end technology to be able to defend it.
With new threats, unproven technology, and a rash of pricey design failures, are aircraft carriers worth the high cost?
United States Navy, and we'll have to see. They don't call it an arms race for nothing. I mean, it's a race to the finish.
Building a carrier can take more than a decade and involves thousands of workers. Companies such as Huntington Ingalls Industries' Newport News Shipbuilding Division take the lead, and other companies like General Electric are also involved in integrating the systems in the new ship hull. The Navy wants 10 Ford-class carriers, but that could change. Some have advocated that the multi-billion-dollar program is the wrong strategy for the Navy, and that fewer carriers, or more small carriers, could be a better bet.
So that's the multi-billion-dollar question. Should the US Navy move away from aircraft carriers? It's a great question, and it's one that if you get a bunch of navalists around the table with a bottle of scotch, and talk about, you could argue about it all night and nobody would have a better idea on the other side of which direction we should go.
to let this slow down.
China's shipbuilding also works much more closely with the state than shipbuilders in democratic countries. The China State Shipbuilding Corporation re-merged with the China Shipbuilding Industry Company in 2019, which created the largest shipbuilding company in the world with $110 billion in assets and 20% of global market share.
What you see is just that there's not a clear separation between sort of the commercial side of things and the military side. The same shipyards that are producing, commercial vessels that, other countries are buying, right? They need tankers or whatever the case may be. The next dock over, just a little bit over, is also where, military vessels are being produced. So there's a blurring there between the military and the commercial side, which I think is a question that we need to spend a little bit more time, thinking about. Like, what are the consequences of that? What is the relationship between a company that has both a commercial and a military arm, and it's getting, financial input or capital injected into it from other countries, right? Because they're looking to purchase commercial vessels. What does that mean as far as helping to advance China's, naval ambitions?
One of the biggest arguments against a larger carrier fleet is that a much cheaper, long-range, advanced guided missile could sink these billion-dollar floating airfields.
Which side is going to be able to innovate into what is the next type of warfare that comes after the sort of classic 20th century style of carrier warfare that we've seen. And then that might continue to be a carrier-based and carrier-centric type of naval warfare, or it might become more reliant upon sort of more asymmetric types of warfare we've seen, such as carrier-based drones, or even land-based drones, or ship-based missiles, or even land-based missiles. We don't know. All we know is that there is, both with the United States and China, a sustained investment in new technologies, and seeing how those technologies overlay with one another. That is going to be the future of naval warfare.
China, Iran, and Russia are three major producers of guided missiles designed to attack carriers. But carriers remain effective at lower intensity missions. A soft operation is where a carrier is used to help after a natural disaster or to train with other nations.
Talk about the smaller carriers. Man, that's a big part of their job. Just showing up in humanitarian assistance roles and in disasters. You get a lot of utility out of that flight deck. And the equipment that the Marines have is designed to haul heavy stuff a long way. Sometimes in a war, that's really handy. Every time in a war, that's really handy. But in a disaster, it's also vitally important.
China continues to grow its blue water navy, but questions remain about its capabilities.
Yes, technology is important. Yes, it's making really impressive strides that we shouldn't undercut, that we should be paying very close attention to. But the human element is more important in my view, because it's really about how those systems are operated by whom, and how that can be used to secure certain types of objectives. And that's something with China, we just haven't seen it happen yet.
With the ongoing concerns about the viability of the carrier, it's possible that the US Navy could change its plans for the size and mixture of the carriers it will buy in the future.
There's a range of capabilities that the carrier brings, and so it's not just the fighter jets coming off the flight deck. It's all these other capabilities that the carrier brings that are really essential to any warfighting effort on the open ocean.
The U.S. Navy needs to continue to innovate, and with innovation, there are obviously setbacks. We've seen that one of the great aces the United States has is our private sector, which is an incredible incubator for innovation. And when the private sector teams up with government, the government puts that muscle behind the private sector, you can really see these innovations taken to scale.